All right, for those of you just joining us, welcome. Just a few quick housekeeping items before we get started here. Today's webinar is being recorded for anybody who may have coworkers unable to attend live. We'll be posting it on our YouTube channel later this week. Everybody will be muted during the presentation to help minimize some of that background noise, and then we'll open things up for questions at the end. That said, please feel free to drop your questions in the chat at any time during the presentation, and we'll do our best to address as many of them as we can towards the end. Thank you all for joining, and with that, I will pass it over to Terry.
Thanks so much. Thank you all for being here. We are excited to have you with us for this PRC-030 deeper dive. So I'm Terry Harbor. I'm with GridSme, and we're glad you're here. So we'll first cover some agenda items. So we'll talk about some disclaimers. We'll give an overview of PRC-030 and its requirements, some compliance actions that you can take to help you be successful with this standard, some next steps, any closing thoughts, and of course, questions at the end. So those disclaimers first is GridSme cannot endorse any specific vendor or products. Examples shown may or may not be compliant as much as I want them to be perfect. Each facility is different, so always work with your EPC and your engineering provider to make sure that you have a compliant design. So PRC-030 seeks to identify, analyze, and correct plant megawatt change events. It builds on the PRC-028 disturbance monitoring equipment standard. Therefore, it can't be effectively implemented until the disturbance monitoring equipment is installed and operational. That will make it effective on the later of either October 1, 2026, or when your PRC-028 equipment is installed and operational, which may be as late as December 31st of 2028. So let's summarize the requirements for PRC-030. This one isn't quite as technical as the other two, but the first one is somewhat technical. So you need to implement a documented process to identify events over a 4-second rolling window. The industry is debating a little bit on what that 4 seconds means. Some people say it could mean a snapshot. Others think it means a rolling window. I think the industry is going to sort of lean towards the latter. So your process must look for either a complete facility loss of output or the greater of either a 20 megawatt change or 10% change of your plant's gross nameplate capability. So if you have a facility that's more than 200 megawatts, you're probably going to use that second bullet. The standard does include both Category 1 and Category 2 plants. As a brief refresher, your Category 1 plant is your traditional bulk electric system plant, an aggregation of 75 MVA or more of inverters connected at 100 kV and greater. The Category 2 plants are smaller. That's an aggregation of 20 MVA or more of inverters connected at 60 kV and greater. So R1 does contain some exclusions. So it has weather exclusions. So if you get a sudden change in wind speed or solar irradiance, that can be an exclusion. If you have resource dispatching, ramping, planned outages, or testing, those could be exclusions. If there's transmission or collection system trips, those could be exclusions. And last, megawatt reductions from a PRC-4 misoperation might be an exclusion. So industry wanted a bright line between those two standards, either PRC-4 or PRC-030, but not both. To summarize requirement 2, this is your analysis requirement. So within a 90 calendar day of a megawatt change event, analyze your IBR or your facility performance, confirm that it's a PRC-030 event, determine a root cause for the event, and document your PRC-29 real and reactive ride-through responses. Identify any performance issues, determine if corrective actions are needed, and determine the applicability to any other GEO IBRs that you may own or operate. A summary of requirement 3, this is your corrective action plan requirement. So within 60 calendar days of a completed R2 analysis, identify any corrective action plans or performance issues, develop and provide one of the following to your RC, BA, or TOP, either a corrective action plan for the facility and any other applicable facilities owned and operated by the GO, or a technical justification of why the corrective actions won't be completed. And then to summarize requirement 4, this is your implementation requirement. So implement those corrective action plans. Make sure those action plans have actions and timetables in them. Update and notify each RC if the actions or timetables change. I'm not sure why NERC excluded the BA and TOP in R4, but as a good practice, maybe you want to notify that BA and TOP2 from requirement 3, and notify each RC when the cap is complete. So that's a summary. So let's talk about some steps that you can take to be successful with these requirements. So thinking about requirement 1 again and the equipment requirements, you can use your PRC-028 disturbance monitoring equipment to monitor your plant megawatt changes at the main power transformer high side over a 4-second rolling window. Consider using SCADA megawatt threshold alarms with a 4-second delay to identify potential change events. The goal here is to use the technology to help you identify what is and isn't a real megawatt event. So for evidence, keep your megawatts and your megabars, any PRC-030 alarms, logs, SCADA data, documents, and analyses confirming or dismissing the potential event. R1 can give you what I'll term a false positive. So consider ways to identify when an event isn't a PRC-030 event. So this isn't a NERC requirement, but adding additional data streams might make the process easier for you. So consider integrating wind speed or solar irradiance data. Think about weather, temperature, and precipitation data for freezing events, resource dispatch and ramping signals, transmission or collector trips and alarms, inverter trips and alarms, and hopefully this additional data should assist you in determining what is an actual or not, or a false event. Moving to the action steps for a procedure, have a process to confirm if the event qualifies as a PRC-030 event or not. You can refer to your PRC-28, 29, and 30 disturbance monitoring equipment procedures. Consider a PRC-030 checklist. If you're using the GridSME procedures, you can look in attachment B, section 4. Gather any event logs and data recordings, gather your SCADA reports and alarms, and then try to confirm or dismiss the potential event. And that will lead you into an R2 analysis process. So your process must perform an analysis within 90 calendar days of the megawatt change. It needs to document the facility's ride-through performance, identify any performance issues, determine a root cause, determine if corrective actions are needed, and provide results upon request to the RC, and always document your steps and conclusions as for compliance. This would lead you into your requirement 3 process. Your 60-day corrective action process must have a corrective action plan for identified inverter-based resources or other applicable facilities, or a technical justification that addresses why those corrective actions cannot be implemented. Always document dates, steps, and conclusions for compliance. And then your requirement 4 process would need for each corrective action plan in requirement 3, implement the corrective action plan, update the correction action plan if those actions or timetables change, notify each associated RC again when those corrective action plans or timetables change, and then document when each step is completed for compliance. So now that we've talked about action steps that you can take to be compliant, let's run through a really quick example. So let's assume that we have a 150 megawatt inverter-based resource plant connected at 138 kV. This could be wind, solar, or battery energy storage. For a transmission event some 50 miles distant, assume that 130 megawatts of inverters trip at this facility, and assume the 130 megawatts aren't restored for 5 minutes or more. Walking through our R1 process, we can look at that 130 megawatts of inverter trips, that's well over a 20 megawatt threshold. Those megawatts weren't restored for maybe up to 5 minutes, so that's well over the 4-second threshold. We didn't note any exclusions, so we'll go through the process of gathering information. We'll gather alarms, logs, SCADA, and event data, and then we'll do an assessment. So in this theoretical case, the IBR data showed the inverters tripped on what's termed rate of change of frequency protections or Rokoff protection. So as the entity, we would check the Rokoff settings, and in this case, we'd note that they were set at 1 volts per hertz. That would appear to be a valid equipment issue because that doesn't meet the PRC-29 ride-through criteria of 5 volts per hertz or more. So we would document what we think is a confirmed event. That would lead us into our R2 90-day change analysis process. So we would need to record the dates and times when the megawatts changed. We would need to contact our compliance team for assistance. We need to document the facility's ride-through performance, megawatts, megavars, trip alarms, etc. Then we need to assess those inverters and the facility's performance. In this case, and identify a root cause. And in this case, we think it's those inadequate Rokoff settings. And then document the date when the R2 process is complete, hopefully within 90 days for compliance. That would lead us into requirement 3 and our corrective action plans. So we would need to document the date the R3 corrective action plan started, which would be the same date as the requirement 2 process ended. We'd want to contact our compliance team again for any assistance. We'd want to develop a corrective action plan with actions and timetables. So as an example here, we might say that we would plan to contact our manufacturer about the 1 volts per hertz Rokoff capability within some 30 days. And then our next step might be to determine if updates can allow more than 5 volts per hertz within 90 days. And if that's successful, update all of the inverters within 365 days if possible. Then we would want to document when the cap is completed for compliance. And then that would lead us into our implementation phase of the corrective action plan. So we would want to track and document when each cap action is completed. So if we contacted the manufacturer and determined that the updates can allow more than 5 volts per hertz within 15 days, we would want to document that. If the manufacturer got back to us within 75 days, verifying that the firmware updates can allow the Rokoff settings to be updated to more than 5 volts per hertz, we would want to document that and definitely keep that as evidence that yes, this can be done. And then we would want to go through the process of updating all the inverters at our facility, and we'd want to watch that we're going to meet our target date of 365 days. And we'd want to keep all of the O&M reports and updated settings or other evidence to show that when each inverter was updated, that it was fixed and complete. So that will help us track and document progress and verify completion of our corrective action plans. And with that, that's really what I had for you this afternoon. I'll go ahead and open this up to any questions you guys might have. It's a quiet group today. No, I'm not seeing anything coming in on the chat. Feel free to write anything in the chat if you do have questions there as well.
Do we have any questions for Terry today
I
before
have
we
a
wrap up?
question.
Oh, perfect.
All right.
Hi, Terry. Hey, I was just earlier in the presentation you mentioned how this is applicable to Category 1 and Category 2. I'm sorry, I don't know if I caught it or if I'm missing something, but are the effective dates for all of these standards the same for Category 1 or Category 2, or was it already implemented for Category 1 earlier?
Good question. And you're right, they're not the same. So Category 1 comes in first. Category 2 typically comes in after Category 1. So I don't have the dates right off the top of my head. I should have had them written down. But I think you have until at least January of 2027 for some of the Category 2 facilities.
And thank you. So maybe you don't have the dates, but this is kind of a stepped integration the way it happened. So 28 is kind of the first one, 29 and 30, right? So do you happen to know the first dates for Category 1 and Category 2 for PRC 28? And I think that one was to basically have a plan, right?
Sure. January 1, you had to have a plan for how you were going to identify disturbance monitoring equipment that had failed within 90 days and actions to take within 90 days. So as long as you have a plan written down, you're compliant with that requirement. And the thing is, you can't do the operational piece of that plan until at least July 1, 2026 is when the operational requirements become effective. Again, there's a two-part piece to that. If you had a commercial operation date after April 1 of 2025, you need to have your PRC-28 equipment installed and operational by July 1 of 2026. If you had a commercial operation date prior to April 1 of 2025, you get more time, and that time is, I think, December 31st of 2028 for
Okay,
Category
so
1.
Category 1, Jan 1 was the date for the plan, and then the other two caveats of COD date. Great.
Yeah,
Thank you
July
very much.
1 and then December 31, 2028.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Great question. Anything else that I can help somebody with? All right. Guys, certainly don't hesitate to send more questions into the chat. Oh, I think Jay Grafton may have a question. He says he's still on mute.
Yeah, there, I got it to work. I just want to ask, and I wanted to confirm. So when we're inside the no trip zone, PRC 29, we don't have to do an analysis unless we hit these trip levels in PRC 30, correct? Is that the way
No,
the standards
I
fit
think,
together?
yeah, I think it's they're somewhat tied to the hip, but if you enter that no trip zone, I know that they're going to want you to do that PRC 29 analysis.
Well, the reason I'm asking is your example, let's say we're staying at PU and the frequency on the transmission system is right where it needs to be, but the inverter's trip. So what I was understanding from your conversation, at that point, we've tripped inside the no trip zone. And now we've got to go back and analyze by PRC 30 whether or not we, exceeded the 20 megawatts or 10%. Is that how these two standards fit together?
That is a great question, Jay. I think I may have used an example and referenced PRC 29 just as I'm going to say I think these are standalone. This is PRC 30 is a learning requirement. So if you have these megawatt trips or inverter trips for events on the system like they had in the Odessa events, NERC wants you to start investigating. And I thought the Rokoff verification was a pretty reasonable, simple explanation. And I referenced PRC-29 because that is one of the PRC-29 criteria. I probably shouldn't have said it's only because of PRC-29. I probably shouldn't have mixed those two requirements. I think.
No, I wasn't interpreting it was only PRC-29. My point is it's your example is for PRC-30, we got to look at the ride through and all that. So
yes.
The bottom line, what I picked up out of that with PRC-30 was we tripped those levels and we've got to go do the analysis. Part of the analysis is to look at the ride through and the settings. That's what I got, you said.
That's correct. Yes. I agree with you there.
So if we have inverters tripped that are below that 20 megawatts, for a larger facility, we don't have to go do that analysis, right?
Not the PRC-30 analysis. You're correct.
And I'm not picking up that we necessarily need to do the PRC-29 analysis, or we would.
I still think
here we've got inverters that tripped inside that trip zone. So, is there some threshold that we don't have to go through all this root cause analysis and stuff for PRC-29? So let's suppose 5 megawatts worth of inverters tripped off inside that no trip zone on PRC-29. Have we got to go look at that?
I think that they would still want you to go look at that and fix that for PRC-29, but you're right, it wouldn't trigger PRC-30.
Okay. Thanks.
It's a great question, and thank you, Jay. All right, looks like we might have a question. Can we provide an exact list for each standard? Okay. Oh, I see. Nope, I think that's a response to Paula.
Was that something for me? I'm not seeing the chat. Let me move over.
Yeah, I think Ben was responding over to maybe talk about. Yes. We can provide you. Yeah.
I'm on my phone right now, so the chat's a little hard to end the meeting. So Ben, I'll take that list.
Yep, I'll shoot you an email. I just wanted to express we can send you a list of any specific enforcement dates by standard, based on the COD and Cat 1 versus Cat 2 to help you understand what you're working with on all the facilities.
Perfect. Appreciate it. Don't mean to do business on the whole webinar, but if you can maybe also start looking at a PRC-28 plan for our Cat 1s, that'd be appreciated. And I can send you an email after this.
So.
Thank you. And thanks, Ben. Vivian, I'm not seeing any other items coming in on the chat. Any
Do we
final
have
items
any
from
last questions for Terry from anybody? All right. Well, if not, we will wrap up here. Thanks everybody so much for joining us today. This recording will be available on our YouTube channel in the next few days. If any additional questions come up after the webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out with us and we can help you out with that. Our next webinar will be on March 10th and we'll be talking about market changes. I'll drop the registration link in the chat and we hope to see everybody there. Thanks for joining us and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.